The relevance here, of course, is that the United States government has blamed the Afghani government for harboring Osama bin Laden, who may or may not be responsible for the events that have happened here in the country today, and therefore the Taliban response. The president, who was in Sarasota, Florida, when President Bush, when the first attack on the Trade Center took place, issued a statement then. He left Sarasota. He is not going back to the White House, at least not yet, but he has told reporters, quote, "We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Make no mistake," said the president, "the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts." The president said the U.S. military has been put on a high alert status and said he had taken security precautions to ensure the government continues to function. And as we said, the president at this moment is not going back to Washington. He has been taken elsewhere for his own safety. There is no reason, by the way, at this point to believe there are continuing threats, but that doesn't mean there aren't any, and the Secret Service is taking no chances, and we can't recall anything even approaching that. We also have a report coming out of London from the Associated Press that followers of Osama bin Laden had warned 3 weeks ago that they would carry out a huge and unprecedented attack on U.S. interests. That, according to a London-based Arab journalist. He adds, they said it would be huge and unprecedented, but did not specify what it was, and we will not assume that this is what it was, but obviously a lot of people are wondering. Joining us on the phone, Richard Holbrooke, former American ambassador to the United Nations, Robert Gates, former head of the CIA, and they join us. Mr. Gates, let me start with you, because I suspect that millions of Americans right now are asking, how could something like this happen? How could it happen?
I think that we have to start by acknowledging that we've been both fortunate and capable in the past. This is not the first major attack like this that has been planned. Several years ago, there was a plot to bring down 11 American jumbo jets in Asia that the FBI and U.S. intelligence thwarted, and there have been some other major attacks. So I think that when you have a free and open country as we do, we are vulnerable to this sort of thing, and it is the face of this term that people have been talking about for several years of asymmetric warfare, and it is a way of getting at us, the most powerful military nation in the world, in ways in which we're vulnerable.
Sir, we heard, and perhaps it's given our proximity to the events, it's a little bit unseemly, but we heard a member of Congress but a few minutes ago essentially say that the American government failed its people. Is it fair to say that this is a failure, or we just can't know it all?
Well, personally, I believe that for people to start blaming people and organizations at this point is highly premature. I think that we need to find out just exactly how bad this situation is and deal with it. The idea of starting to cast blame within hours of something having happened is in fact unseemly.
And Ambassador Holbrooke, does the United States in a situation like this go it alone, or does it gather the international community together as one, or as much of one as it can, and try and respond in that form?
Well, first of all, let me say that at this moment, we have to find out what happened down there. I used to work in that building and was there when it was attacked a few years ago. I know that area. My assistant has a cousin who's now missing in the building, and my thoughts are first for the enormous, unbelievable loss of life and tragedy that's going on in Lower Manhattan. Beyond that, Aaron, on your question, this requires a unified international response by all the key member states of the world community, including, very importantly, Russia. And as for the interview you just broadcast by the foreign minister from the Taliban, let's be clear on his attempts to disassociate himself from Osama bin Laden. We don't know at this point who did this, but it was well coordinated, and done with a degree of skill which exceeds anything. I think Bob Gates will know better than me, but I think, Bob, this is the most skillful, murderous attack ever in terms of coordination. And I want to be very clear on this. Bin Laden himself, as you just suggested, Bin Laden has said that the Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, is the true spiritual leader of the Muslim world. He said that Afghanistan is the purified Islamic State equivalent to Mecca and Medina. And in a tape that the New York Times wrote about 2 days ago, he urged Muslims everywhere, and I'm quoting the New York Times, to migrate to Afghanistan to support the Taliban, saying it's their duty to God, and saying there's now finally a Muslim state that destroys falsehoods and does not succumb to the American infidel and is led by the true believer, Mullah Muhammad Omar, and so on and so forth. So what I want to stress here is that any nation, and this goes for the Taliban and their henchmen in Afghanistan, any nation in the world that harbored anyone associated with this must be treated as though they were part of what is effectively an act of war against the United States. And they cannot hide behind the traditional definitions of difficulty. In the past, we've tried to get Osama bin Laden. He's evaded capture. He almost got killed by a bombing raid 2 or 3 years ago. And I think starting with Afghanistan, we're going to have to hold everyone accountable on the who might have sheltered anyone associated with this act.
So we don't simply, in this conversation, we don't simply hold the group itself, whoever it is, the group itself accountable. We hold anyone accountable, any country, any government accountable if they did nothing to stop it.
Any country which shelters, abates, or helps these people and their cohorts evade capture and the retribution they deserve is, in my view, functionally culpable of the events that took place in New York and Washington and elsewhere today, and must be so warned. I'm not accusing the Taliban specifically at this point because we don't know who did it.
Correct.
But all the evidence points to a connection between Osama bin Laden and Taliban leaders, and an attempt on the Taliban's part to, as the New York Times put it 2 days before this attack, call it as a ploy. And that is a quote from the New York Times before this happened. So I just want to underscore again, we are going to need the support of all our allies in Europe, the Russians, the Chinese, and any other country that might have in the past flirted with playing both sides of the street. Nothing like this has happened in American history. The full dimensions of it are still not clear to anyone, but I think we all can imagine it's going to be heart-wrenching in its dimensions as it becomes fully apparent, and we're not going to be able to leave countries playing two sides here. And I'm sure my friend Bob Gates would not disagree with that.
Let me, Mr. Gates, I want to come back to you. Mr. Holbrooke, stay with us for a minute. I believe now we have the president. This is the president on tape a few moments ago. Well, obviously we're having a technical problem. Let me just tell you what, again, the president said in what has been his second statement. His first statement came after the first attacks here in New York. Short time ago, the president said, "We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people." He added, "We make no mistake," said the president, "the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible." I think we're going to try and hear the president again. Here we go. Yeah. This is coming to us from the broadcast pool. It's traveling with the president. Obviously, we're getting It's a very chaotic day. As you can imagine, a horrible tragedy has taken place, and people are working very hard to get stuff done and get it done right. And obviously the pool is having trouble feeding the tape. But again, the president said, make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. Cowardly acts, I think it's fair to say we don't quite have our arms around the magnitude of it all.
I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President Bush, a short time ago, in his second remarks of the day, the president initially was headed back to the White House, and a security decision was made to divert the flight. And so the president will not go back to Washington, at least not yet. When he will return, perhaps John King can tell us. Our senior White House correspondent joins us now. John? John, are you there?
Yes, I am, Aaron. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I hear you fine. Do you have any word on when the president will come back?
No, we do not. As you reported, we were told earlier in the day the number one priority was the president's safety. The number two priority was to get him back to the White House because they believe that would send a powerful political statement. But as the president was on his way back from Florida, we are told by sources a security decision was made that at this time not to bring him back to Washington. So he was brought, and we won't disclose his exact location for security reasons, he was brought to one of several military installations in the United States that is equipped, we are told, with a very sophisticated command and control bunker, very much like the equipment that would be available to the president here at the White House in the White House Situation Room. We are also told that national security team members are still in the White House Situation Room, and earlier today, at least as of a little more than an hour ago, Vice President Cheney as well, directing operations and monitoring things from there. But the president obviously deciding not to come directly back to Washington. We are told that is for security reasons, delivering the statement you just heard. He has been in touch with congressional leaders, and we are told leadership members of the U.S. Congress are also being taken to an undisclosed location for their security. So we're trying to get more information on that, and we will bring that to you as soon as we have it. Aaron?
John, thanks. Senior White House correspondent John King. Peter Bergen, CNN's Peter Bergen has been tracking the government of Afghanistan for some time, and he was listening in a few moments ago when the Taliban spokesman was speaking. Peter, first of all, what did you hear? Was there anything that perhaps the rest of us might not have heard, any nuance in what you heard? Why don't you start there?
Well, we just heard from the Foreign Minister, Wakil Mutawakil, who's, relatively speaking, a moderate of the Taliban movement. He basically repeated what I think is a standard Taliban line we've heard for the past at least couple of years, which is that Osama bin Laden isn't a terrorist and that he's being contained by the Taliban and that he's not able to conduct political or military missions. This, unfortunately, is really a false statement since Osama bin Laden has been fingered by both Yemeni and U.S. authorities for the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen in October 2000. There isn't an indictment there yet. The FBI continues to investigate, but senior Yemeni officials and senior U.S. officials have said that he's the primary suspect. So we've seen that bin Laden was able to bomb 2 U.S. embassies in Africa in '98 within 9 minutes of each other. We've seen that bin Laden was able to blow a huge hole in the side of one of the most sophisticated warships in the U.S. Navy, the USS Cole in Yemen in October of last year. And unfortunately, he must be top of the list of the person sophisticated enough in terms of operations to bring off these kinds of terrible disasters we've seen today. If you're looking for who is the most likely suspect, he has to be it. You've got an operation in which several people appear to commit suicide. You've also got an operation in which people obviously had some skill in piloting planes. These are clearly attributes of his organization. We know that he has pilots in his organization. We've seen in several instances his members of his organization commit suicide in attacks. We've also seen a pattern of warnings in previous bin Laden attacks in which this fits. 9 weeks before the U.S. embassy bombings in Africa in August of '98, bin Laden held a press conference in Afghanistan talking about, quote, good news in coming weeks. A few months before the USS Cole was bombed in Yemen, a videotape circulated around the Middle East in which bin Laden was wearing a Yemeni dagger, which he's never done in previous photographs, and one of his number 2 called for attacks on U.S. targets in Yemen. Just recently, there's been a videotape floating around the Middle East in which bin Laden, a very confident bin Laden, calls for attacks on the United States, says that the victory of Yemen, referring to the USS Cole attack, will continue. People that I've talked to are familiar with the bin Laden organization, said that the threats on this tape were very serious, that there was an imminent attack in the works. I spoke to somebody who was familiar with the organization a few weeks ago who made those statements to me. I had been very concerned about a potential attack as a result of this tape. It fits with the modus operandi, which is to talk about potential attacks coming up relatively soon without being particularly specific.
Peter, let me just interrupt you for a second. Our senior analyst, Jeff Greenfield, is here, and Jeff has a question. Jeff, go ahead.
Hi, Peter. If I'm not mistaken, you actually interviewed Osama bin Laden some years ago, correct?
Yeah, in '97 for
right.
CNN.
Now, at that time, what did he say about the notion of targeting civilians? I mean, what is the rationale behind targeting civilians for death and destruction?
Well, at that time, Jeff, he told us that because of the American military presence in the Middle East, that he was calling for attacks on U.S. soldiers. Now, he said if American civilians got in the way, that was sort of their problem. So at that time in '97, he was really only calling for attacks on American military targets. Later, that position evolved. By '98, he was calling for attacks on all Americans, whether civilian or military. I think the rationale behind that thinking is that, in his view, if you're an American taxpayer, you're subsidizing the anti-Islamic, quote, activities that he's against, whether that's in Saudi Arabia, with the American military presence there, or with America's support for Israel in the ongoing intifada. Jeff.
Peter, thank you for your work today. I suspect we'll get back to you, but we appreciate the background, which I think gives us some context for why the focus is again on bin Laden. But we should add that as we talk to you now, we can't be certain. We do not know that that's who is behind what has happened. What we do know is an extraordinary national tragedy has taken place, that someone is responsible, that the American government has promised to hunt down and punish, the president's words a short time ago, hunt down and punish whoever is responsible.
Do we have Director Gates still on the phone?
No, I don't believe
I guess we do not. Because the question, obviously, we've already heard it with General Clark and at least one of the congressmen asking the question, how can an agency with an estimated budget of $26.5 billion a year not have known this? I think that's the first of many such questions we're going to be hearing.
Sandy Berger, who worked national security in the Clinton administration, and Richard Holbrooke, the former UN ambassador, back on the phone with us. Mr. Berger, give me a sense of what is going on in Washington right now. Who are the players at the table? Where is the table? And what are they doing?
Well, obviously the President of the United States is at the head of the table no matter where he is. But others around that table include the Secretary of Defense and Attorney General, head of the FBI, the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, because this may obviously involve international matters. I think we, in the midst of our outrage and indignation, we have to stay focused and stay determined here. The first job in this situation is rescue and to deal with what must be thousands of people here who are in peril. This is, in the first instance, a massive rescue operation. In the second instance, it's a security operation. We don't know what else may be part of this multifaceted operation. A number of precautions have been taken in the last few hours, and we have to obviously lock down as much as we can. And then the focus becomes detection. And I think that given the magnitude of this, given the fact that this has obviously involved multiple points of origin in the United States, it is inconceivable to me that we will not know relatively quickly when the dust settles who is responsible for this.
Now, Mr. Holbrooke, Ambassador Holbrooke, what has happened today is extraordinary. Give it a kind of historical context, the enormity of what's taken place.
Well, I think your coverage has made it more clear than anything else, although despite the superb efforts you've made, it hasn't yet become fully evident to your viewers what would be evident to any of us like myself who worked in the World Trade Center. I was there in the last bombing, as I mentioned earlier. That the number of people in that area, including the Chambers Street subway stop, which goes right under the World Trade Center, means that the dimensions of it exceed by a factor of probably 100 any previous incident, including Oklahoma City and the previous World Trade Center in American history. And one must be ready for news that will be very, very grim indeed for all of us as individuals who will have friends and relatives there, and for all Americans. And there will be additional consequences. This is the financial center of the world. The buildings in that area, all of which have now been evacuated, whose infrastructures may be threatened by gas and electrical line degradation, could affect, at least temporarily, the financial markets as well, although I would leave that to Treasury, and Sandy Berger listed the people at the table. I'm not sure if Sandy mentioned the Treasury Secretary, but I'm sure the Treasury and the Fed are well aware of the implications of orderly movement and capital transfers. Now, looking beyond that, Aaron, I think we have to go back to the fact that everyone has talked about the possibility of this kind of thing for a long time, and we faced lesser but similar attempts. This exceeded, apparently, the expectations of the intelligence experts, and we will learn more about that in the weeks to come. But I need to underscore one point. To find the people responsible is going to take a unified international effort. No one nation, not even the United States, can do it on its own. And we must have the full cooperation of the Russians, of the states in the Middle East, because I think the assumption that that's the region where this was planned is pretty solid. And I repeat this again, any nation that is seen to have harbored or abetted or sheltered any of these people must be treated as co-equally responsible. They cannot hide behind the facade we just saw in the remarks of the Taliban foreign minister. And Peter Bergen's extraordinarily insightful explanation a few minutes ago on CNN, I think, is the first real glimpse into that the viewers have had into how dangerous this is. If the Taliban shelters Osama bin Laden, as they do, and if Osama bin Laden is responsible for this as I think almost everyone is going to suspect, then the Taliban must be held equally responsible for what has happened today.
Jeff?
And Ambassador Holbrooke, what can, I would like you to be specific. What does that mean? Are you talking about a retaliatory strike against Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's Jeff.
It's Jeff Greenfield. I'm sorry,
Hi, Jeff. No.
Is that what you mean? That if put the links together?
Jeff. Let me be very frank, and I don't want to lapse into bloody-minded verbal excesses at a moment of high emotion. But let's be very blunt about this. If a country or regime, the Taliban, or some other regime to be determined by the intelligence community, has sheltered people who played a role in this, they cannot hide behind the attributes of they didn't know it, they had nothing to do with it. They must cooperate in the pursuit of the people responsible. And since the Taliban, a leader, has been publicly proclaimed by Osama bin Laden as the present spiritual leader of the Muslim world. I'm referring to bin Laden's declaration that Mullah Muhammad Omar is the rightful leader of the spiritual leader of the Muslim world, something he said on tape, quoted by John Burns in the New York Times 2 days ago. And if, in fact, these people are in some degree of collusion, I personally believe, and I'm only speaking for myself here, I personally believe that the Taliban should be regarded as co-equally responsible for this, and therefore, if and when we consider military action, it is fully justified, and the Taliban should face the same consequences.
Ambassador, thank you. Just quickly, if we can, one last question to Sandy Berger. When you were at the table, in honesty, did you ever anticipate the magnitude, an attack of this magnitude, which has taken place, just to remind people, not just in this city, in New York, not just in the capital, Washington, but on a number of airliners flying across the country as well? Was the planning that broad? Was the fear that great?
Well, I think for some time we have known that we are vulnerable to a serious attack. A multiple attack was thwarted, as you recall, during the Millennium New Year. But I think this, certainly exceeds in scope anything that intelligence community anticipated, and is as I said, an extraordinarily sophisticated operation to carry out something like this from various sites in the United States relatively simultaneously without detection. Whoever has perpetrated this has declared war on the United States, and we will have to respond accordingly. But I would also caution here that we should be careful about jumping to certitude about what happened here. We'll know this soon enough, and we'll also be able to find out why this was not detected.
I think that's just an extraordinarily important point, that what is going on right now at this moment is more important than why it happened. And what is going on is you have thousands of people, we presume, in a number of different places whose lives are at risk, who have been hurt, who need to be rescued, who need to be treated, who need to be taken to hospitals. In New York, in northern New Jersey, where the bulk of the injured are being treated here, there is a critical shortage of blood. Hospital officials are desperately seeking help there. And as Mr. Berger said, time enough later to figure out who and how we deal with it. Ambassador Holbrooke, Sandy Berger, thank you both for joining us. William Rodriguez, I just was looking down. There are literally down below us by Madison Square Garden, which is where we're located, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people on the corner, and they are just looking out. and from where they are, they can't see very much but the smoke. And I can't tell you if something has happened, but and it's lunch hour here, and there's just a lot of people, as there have been all morning, looking at a street that is almost empty. As New York, the southern part of New York, Penn Station by the Garden, essentially being evacuated to allow emergency crews to get to the scene. William Rodriguez is a maintenance worker at the Trade Center, I believe. In any case, he's on the phone with us now. Mr. Rodriguez, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Tell me where you were when, well, which of the two buildings were you in?
I work on the building 1, the one that got hit the first time.
Tell me what happened.
I was on the basement, which is a support floor for the maintenance company, and we hear like a big rumble, not like an impact, like a rumble, like something like moving furniture on a massive way, and all of a sudden we hear another rumble, and a guy comes running into our office, and all his skin was off his body. All his skin, we went crazy, we started screaming, we told him to get out. We took everybody out of the office outside to the loading dock area, and then I went back in, and when I went back in, I saw people, I heard people that were stuck on an elevator, on a freight elevator, because all the elevators went down, and water was going in, and they were probably getting drowned, and we get a couple of pipes and opened the elevator, and we got the people out. I went back up, and I saw one of the officers from the Port Authority Police. I've been working there for 20 years, so I knew him very well. My routine on the World Trade Center is in charge of the staircase. And since there was no elevator service, I have the master key for all the staircase doors. So I went up with the police officer and a group of firemen. As we went up, there was a lot of people coming down. And while we got, it was very difficult to get up.
Mr. Rodriguez, how much time has elapsed here in this, as you recount the events? Did it seem like hours, minutes, seconds?
No, it wasn't hours.
But what did it seem like?
Well, there was a big time, like a gap. There was a gap of time. I won't be able to tell you if it was 15, 20 minutes, but it was a gap of time. We heard while we were on the 33rd floor, on the 27th floor, because we stopped there with the fire department because the equipment was very heavy and they were breathing very hard. They took a break because they couldn't continue going up, so they wanted to take a break.
Yeah.
And we have a person on a wheelchair that we were going to bring down on a gurney, and a lady that was having a problem with a heart attack, and some other guy that was breathing hardly. And we went a couple of floors up while they were putting the person in the gurney, got up to the 39th floor, and we heard on the radio that the 65th floor collapsed.
Right,
Heard it collapsed.
Mr. Rodriguez, let me stop you there at the 65th floor. And let me add, you're a lucky man, it seems like today. Thank you for joining us. Matt Cornelius, you were on the 64th floor, 65th floor?
65th floor. Yeah, that's where I work.
Tell me what happened.
Well, I arrived at work a little bit early today.
What do you do?
And I work for the Port Authority in the aviation department. And I was just putting my stuff away, and all of a sudden we heard a loud crash. And the building started shaking, kind of moving like a wave.
What did you think was happening?
I had no idea. I mean, we figured either an airplane had hit it or our first instinct was airplane. And everyone started screaming and said, you know, move away from the windows and let's get out of here. And we saw debris fall past the window on the north side.
How much, just to help our viewers kind of orient themselves, you're on the 65th floor of a building that is how many stories?
I believe it's 110.
So 50 stories above you this has taken place.
I imagine so.
Okay.
We really had no idea at all what had happened until we exited the building. I mean, I had no idea the magnitude. Just took the stairs. I believe I actually was in the stairs as that same man because I remember I saw the person in the wheelchair. We made it pretty fast down to 40th floor, and then from there the smoke got a little bit thick and it was a lot slower. We maybe made a floor about every 2 minutes.
And how many people are in this group with you?
Well, there was just one other person that I worked with that was with us. It was packed. I mean, it was a virtual traffic jam in the staircase, up and down, I guess. It was very full.
People screaming?
No, actually, everyone maintained calm really well. I was impressed with that. I think for some people, it brought back memories of the bombing. People had been there before when that happened. But I was amazed, really. We got in the stairway, we were moving down. When the fire department were coming up, they'd say, move to the left. Everyone moved to the left, and everyone complied. A couple people started crying a little bit, but we said we're going to get out of here. We just got to focus and take it one step at a time.
Was it noisy, or was there screaming?
No, was
it quiet? Was it eerie?
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't quiet. I mean, people were talking. In fact, someone was laughing. I kept hearing that, and I thought that was strange. But it was pretty normal. I mean, it wasn't. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, all we knew was something major had happened. Exactly, but we didn't really understand the full severity of the situation. So people weren't panicking. Once we got down to they put us on the plaza level, which was disturbing because there was a lot of debris in the plaza level and a lot of carnage, basically. We then moved out the back towards Broadway, and they said, the police were saying, "Don't look back, don't look back." And of course, I made it about half a block, and I looked back, and I saw the other tower on fire, and I couldn't believe it. And
Were you terrified?
Yeah. When we were stuck in that stairway, I mean, we stopped every now and then. It started to get nervous, but we never had any fear of the building collapse. I mean, we had no idea what was going on. So once I got out, and it's still sinking in the real full severity of it. I mean, it's just an awful thing.
That's true of everybody.
Yeah. So
lucky man.
I am very lucky. I thank God very much.
Just well you might. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Very much. Thank you. In Washington, D.C., thank you, Matt. Yep. They have declared a state of emergency. Do we have a guest there, or? Okay. Washington has declared Washington, D.C. a state of emergency. I believe I was just told that the Space Needle in Seattle has been closed down. Is that correct? Did I hear you guys? There are a couple of points we might make there. Back in the year 2000, just before New Year's Eve, coming into Washington State, a man was stopped with explosives, and as it turned out, that was a part of a planned terrorist attack, and it caused the city of Seattle to shut down what had been an enormously elaborate Millennium celebration. They are very much on edge in Seattle. We were just there last week, and it's not surprising to me that they would shut that building down. Elise Marcos is an official with New York City Hospitals, and he joins us now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you okay.
I apologize for the stuttered introduction. Tell me the situation in the hospitals.
Well, at Bellevue Hospital, which is the largest public hospital in the city, and is relatively near the incident, we have, as of now, received approximately 30 patients. Two are dead, unfortunately. Some have brain injuries, very serious fractures, and we are now getting more patients from other hospitals that need microsurgery or implantation of limbs and plastic surgery. So it is a rather overwhelming situation here.
Mr. Marcos, you were outside the buildings in that period between the planes hitting and the buildings collapsing. Can you tell me what you saw?
Well, as president of the public hospitals, I was asked immediately within seconds to join the crisis assistance unit, which is located across the street from the World Trade Center. So I drove there, and as I was parking, a huge piece of rock hit the back of the car, broke the windshield where I was sitting, so I'm very lucky to be alive. Then when I went to the center was evacuated because they were afraid that a second plane may be coming. I joined the fire commissioner, and then I needed to use the telephone because cellular phones were not working. I went into, I think, American Express building, and as I was there, one of the buildings collapsed, and we were unable to leave that building, and thanks to a very brave police officer who was able to find an exit, we are here today.
Mr. Marcos, we heard reports that people were jumping out of the building. Did you see that?
Unfortunately, I saw about 5 people jumping from up the building, and I can tell you there's no other. I've never had such an overwhelming and terrible experience in my life. Although I've been in this job for a long time and I have seen a lot of things, it's just something that is very hard to describe. But at the same time, I have to say that the fire department, the police department, they were all there. They were so brave, all those men and women, that I feel that thanks to them, many people were saved.
Yes, can I interrupt there for a second? When I was coming down, just as I left the building, there were still firemen inside the building on those floors that I mentioned before, on the 34, 38, 39, and 27th floor. And I'm 100% sure that they didn't make it. And the officer that told me to get out with the group that was taking the person on the gurney was an officer from the Port Authority Police, Officer Lim. I know he didn't make it, because as I came out of the building, I saw a lot of bodies on the floor. I saw a lady encrusted on the floor. That's probably one of the person that jumped from the building, if he jumped from the building. But it was like it melted on the floor. That's how bad it was. As I came out of the building, we hear the rumbling, and I was told, run. When I look up, everything is coming down, and I start running as fast as I could, and we all jumped under one of the fire trucks, right on time, because everything just came right on top of us. We could have been crushed because the truck was coming down on us. And all of a sudden, it stopped, and we were pulled out from under the truck. But I know these officers didn't make it.
Mr. Marcos, Mr. Martinez, thank you for your extraordinary descriptions of what was going on in and around the buildings, excuse me, around 9 o'clock this morning, a little before 9, and a little after 9 here in New York. We've heard a number of references today. Certainly the first thing we thought of as we were coming in to the February 93 attack on the World Trade Center. And as horrible as that was, and it was, 6 people died that day. Many hundreds were injured, but 6 people perished. It is not reasonable to believe that the numbers will be anything like that. They will be far, far worse. And I think we're just beginning to get a sense of the magnitude. CNN's Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we're listening to your reporting and the people you've been talking with. I have to say, in stunned silence, none of us ever seen anything close to the magnitude of this horrific events of this morning. Just to quickly recap, 4 commercial airplanes in the United States, 2 United Airlines, 2 American Airlines, have crashed. We know 2 of them went into, and you can see the flights here, American Airlines Flight 11 leaving Boston on the way to Los Angeles. This is one of the planes, American Airlines 77 Dulles to Los Angeles. That plane, that second plane, believed to have crashed into the Pentagon, but again, that's not confirmed. The first American Airlines flight believed to have crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. United Airlines Flight 93 leaving Newark on the way to San Francisco, believed to have crashed in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. And finally, another United Airlines flight believed to have crashed into the World Trade Center. In all, horrific, not just damage, but surely loss of life. It's far too early to know victims, the number of victims, the number of casualties. We do have some information we want to share with you. In addition to what you're seeing in New York City, one of those planes, as we said, crashed into the Pentagon. We're going to be taking you there in a moment to our correspondent, Bob Franken. But we want to let you know what we're learning, what our correspondents are learning, that in the last little while, 5 battleships, some of them destroyers, we know have left Norfolk and have moved out of port in order to be deployed for security reasons along the east coast of the United States. In addition, 2 aircraft carriers that were based in Norfolk, in the Norfolk area, have been moved out to sea and on their way to New York, to the New York area. Now, we don't have much more information than that. We were originally told they were just leaving port for safety reasons, for security reasons. We're now told that very specifically the mission of the aircraft carriers is to move into the New York area. The mission of the battleships ships to be deployed along the East Coast. And of course, as we get more information, we'll share that with you. As I turn to Bob Franken at the Pentagon, I just want to tell you, President Bush, we can tell you now, has been at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. He's now leaving that site on his way to an undisclosed location. Authorities telling us that they will not tell us where he is headed. Secretary of State Powell, the same story there, on his way back to the United States from a conference in Peru to an undisclosed location. And leaders of the United States Congress, both parties and both houses of Congress, moved to an undisclosed location. Now to our correspondent at the Pentagon, Bob Franken, who is, I believe, at a safe distance there from what's been going on. Bob, please bring us up to date.
Well, we're on the east side of the Pentagon, as you can see, Judy, and you can see over my shoulder that smoke continues to billow, smoke that is sometimes thick, sometimes a little dissipated, but we're talking about 4.5 hours after a plane, it is described as probably being a jumbo jet-sized plane, crashed into the Pentagon about 9:20 this morning. We now want to show you what it looks like on the west side. This is video that was shot by Vito Maggiola, who is an assignment editor and producer for CNN, who was able to get video. You can see that firefighters there are fighting in an area, rings 4, 5, and 6, on the west side of the Pentagon. Vito says that it was an area, in his estimation, that was about 30 yards wide and about 10 yards deep into the building. Firefighting was hampered, he says, because inside the building, sprinklers, standpipes, other forms of hydrants were damaged. There's an estimate that several hundred firefighters and emergency workers are there at the Pentagon. We're also told, of course, that there have been evacuation efforts throughout the day. We can see those. We do not have an estimate on the number of casualties. I can tell you that from our vantage point, we have seen a constant parade of casualty units, military casualty units, civilian ambulances, fire engines, and the like going to the Pentagon. There, of course, have been casualties, but as I said, we don't have any sort of estimate about that now. Now, we do also have somebody to talk with us who was an eyewitness to the actual crash. He was watching from Arlington, Virginia, which is a suburb over. His name is Tim Timmerman. Mr. Timmerman, are you with us right now?
I sure am.
You're a pilot. Tell us what you saw.
Well, I was looking out the window. I live on the 16th floor overlooking the Pentagon and the corner apartment, so I have quite a panorama. And being next to National Airport, I hear jets all the time, but this jet engine I heard was way too loud. I looked out to the south, to the southwest, and it came right down 395, right over Columbia Pike. And as it went by the Sheraton Hotel, the pilot added power to the engines. I heard it spool up a little more. And then I lost it behind a building, and then it came out, and I saw it hit right in front of it. It didn't appear to crash into the building. Most of the energy was dissipated and hitting the ground. But I saw the nose break up, I saw the wings fly forward, and then the conflagration just engulfed everything in flames. It was horrible.
What can you tell us about the plane itself?
It was a Boeing 757, American Airlines, no question.
You say that there was a Boeing, and you say it was a 757 or 767. It's hard.
757.
757,
yeah,
which
American
of course
Airlines.
is American Airlines, one of the new generation of jets, and of course,
it was not. It was so close to me. It was like looking out my window and looking at the helicopter. It was just right there.
We were told that it was. We were told that it was flying so low that it clipped off a couple of light poles on its way in.
That might have happened behind the apartments that occluded my view, and when it reappeared, it was right before impact. And like I said, I saw the airplane disintegrate and then just blow up into a huge ball of flames.
So there was a fireball that you saw.
Absolutely, and the building shook, and it was, quite a tremendous explosion.
What did you see after that?
Nothing but the flames, and I sat here and I took a few pictures out my window, and I noticed the fire trucks, and the response was just wonderful. Fire trucks were there quickly. I saw the area. The building didn't look very damaged initially, but I do see now, looking out my window, there's quite a chunk in it. But I think the blessing here might have been that the airplane hit before it hit the building, hit the ground. A lot of energy might have gone that way. That's what it appeared like.
Well, there is, of course, we've heard some discussion about the fact that it could have been worse had it actually gone a little bit higher and gone into what's called the ring, the center of this Pentagon, which is this is a five-sided building.
Right. As you know, the rings are A, B, C, D, E. It has just caught the E ring on the outside, and that's why I felt it didn't look as damaged as it could be. It looked like on the helipad, which is on that side.
Right. Did you see any people being removed, any injured being removed, that type of thing?
No, sir. up at about a quarter of a mile, if maybe a little bit closer, and at that point I saw nothing like that.
Tim Timmerman, thank you very much. An eyewitness, Judy, to the crash. We still have no idea about the number of casualties. We know that there is a gaping hole on the west side of the Pentagon. As you can see, the smoke continues to billow. Judy?
All right, Bob Franken, and of course our audience, no surprise, hospitals in the Washington area dealing with casualties from the plane crash at the Pentagon. We were told a few hours ago there's a blood shortage in the Washington area. Hospitals wanting people to know if you are in a position to donate blood, it would very much be needed and appreciated. And I just want to quickly say here before we go to the site of the Pennsylvania crash that the D.C. National Guard was having difficulty getting through to people that it needs to mobilize. And this specifically, this is information specific to the Washington, D.C. area. The D.C. Guard wants to alert the 372nd Military Police Battalion and its subordinate companies to report as soon as possible to the D.C. Armory. Now, we got this information just about half an hour ago, and there have been so many other stories and pieces of information coming in. We haven't been able to get this out, but we do want to get it out now. Perhaps it will do some good. Joining us now, I mentioned to you a moment ago that we have a correspondent on the scene of the airplane crash into the ground, we believe. I'm going to go to David Mattingly, CNN correspondent there in Pennsylvania. This is near Shanksville, Somerset County in western Pennsylvania, about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. David Mattingly, are you with us now?
Yes, Judy, I'm here, and we are outside of the town of Shanksville. And to give you some idea of what kind of countryside this is, to my left is a huge field of corn. To my right is a rolling green pastoral hill here at the edge of the Allegheny Mountains. One of the last places you would probably expect to be touched by the violence of an act of terrible terrorism like we have seen today. But people here in the area have reported that they saw a commercial airliner going overhead at about 2,000 to 3,000 feet with no landing gear down. They heard then a loud roar of an engine, at which point the jet climbed and then banked sharply to the left before going down straight on a 45-degree angle. Now, it hit the ground at that 45-degree angle. People here at the scene say there are no large pieces of debris even left from the plane. No hope of, at this point, it seems to be no hope of survivors. There's just about every piece of emergency personnel here from miles around. The mood is considerably calmer, as you might imagine, than what you might see in Washington or New York, but there is a great deal of concern. Schools are being closed, businesses are being closed up into Pittsburgh and other parts of Pennsylvania. Prayer vigils are being reported, scheduled all across this part of Pennsylvania as far as away as Altoona has been reported. Also, at this point, there has been an emergency staging area set up. We are a good ways away from the crash scene, and we will see what transpires here. Judy?
David Mattingly on the scene, as we're saying there, near Shanksville, a small town in Somerset County, about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh. This the site of one of the two United Airlines aircraft. This a Boeing 757 left Newark, New Jersey this morning on its way to San Francisco. This is the plane that we know crashed. And you just, with David Mattingly's report, looking at the site of where this plane came down. We don't know where, we presume terrorists behind this, what their destination was, what their target was. We can only presume, we can only guess that they were short of the target, that they were headed someplace farther, someplace else from where they landed. With me now here in the studio, Connecticut Democratic Senator Christopher Dodd. Senator Dodd, a longtime member of not only the Senate, but of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Dodd, first of all, what can you say to the American people listening who want to know about the security of the leaders of our country, the President, and everyone else?
Well, I think they've taken the proper steps in here, and you haven't heard as much from some of the leaders as you might like at this point, but I think those responsible for their security are doing exactly what they should be doing. I'm told that they're in very good shape, that they are being isolated because we don't know the magnitude of this effort. It's beyond our imagination already what has occurred. And if someone or organization clearly responsible for this sophisticated an effort the potential for them doing more damage is obviously obvious. And so making sure that our leaders are secure is the right step. And for those who may be wondering abroad who are watching this program, Judy, I'm a Democrat, as you know. We stand completely and totally behind our president. We may have our differences from time to time. But on a day like this, which rivals, if not exceeds, the attack on Pearl Harbor, almost 60 years ago, 3 months from now, we stand totally united behind our president and our government. They're taking the proper steps. We're pulling together as a people, and we will overcome this. Initially, obviously, our prayers and thoughts goes for those who've lost their lives, who've been injured in this incredible attack. And then
Senator,
we will, yes, I'm sorry.
Senator, I'm just going to interrupt you now. We're told President Bush just about to be wheels up from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And now let's go back to Aaron Brown in New York.
Judy, thank you. Senator, thank you both. I believe we have former Secretary Henry Kissinger on the phone. The Secretary is in Germany today, and he joins us on the phone from there. Mr. Kissinger, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Just quickly, sir, your reactions to what is unfolding in the United States today.
Well, it's obviously a shocking event. It was, I was giving a speech when somebody came in and interrupted the question period to make that announcement, and nobody in the room believed it. They all thought it had to be a mistake. Well, it's obviously it's an integrated attack and must be dealt with in an integrated way.
Well, when you say an integrated attack and dealt with in an integrated way, tell me what that means, sir.
Well, it is obviously any organization that can plan such a coordinated attack within a very brief period of time must have substantial resources and must have a very capable organization and must have a haven where it is planning these things. You can't do that in a back room.
And when you talk about an integrated response...
Well, the integrated response is obviously, first of all, I want to say,
okay,
like every American right now, I'm behind the president. And this, the response right now has been exactly what is needed. And there's the first necessity has to be to go through the tragedy, to help the families, and to clean up the immediate situation. Then the next step will have to be a program to attempt to eradicate the source of this and to bring pressure and serious pressure on governments that harbor this kind of organization, and especially governments where we suspect that these organizations are located.
Sir, for a long time, there's been a kind of cat and mouse game, and I don't make light of this in any sense when I say game, between the governments that harbor terrorists and our government, other Western governments. It's all changed today, hasn't it? I mean, the stakes have changed enormously. The response likely will change enormously. It's all different, isn't it?
That's correct. When these terrorists dare to attack the territory of the United States, it then becomes a question of the functioning of our society. And we have to protect ourselves, and I'm sure we will. And I think it must now, it's not an isolated attack. It's not just an attack on an embassy, which is bad enough. And it can't be dealt with one retaliatory blow.
It cannot be dealt with one retaliatory blow?
No. There has to be a systemic attack. I don't know what that means.
I understand.
And I'm not sitting here with a great plan. I'm saying this is what I would think our government will want to work towards.
And would you expect that we, the United States government, will find enormous international support for whatever actions the United States government chooses to take, or will there be those important governments that resist here?
Well, first thing is we have to protect ourselves. We would have, of course, liked to get as much support as we can. And we will be able to judge our friends by the degree of support that we get. But there'll be some governments who say we have to understand the conditions that produce this. There will come a time to deal with its circumstances, but the immediate thing is